So here we are, we're just screwing the base onto the side cabinet, and hopefully that should be, should go on fairly smoothly. Now, one thing to note, something I realised quite early on, is make use of the torque settings on your screwdriver. As you can see on mine, I'm all the way down to 1, and the reason why I do that is because when I put the screws in, if you've got too high a torque, you'll just rip through the wood through your MDF, and you'll have a big hole on either side. So if you're on number 1, yeah, it went just the right size, and that click was the screw driver just getting to the end of its torque. Right, once the base is put on, turn the cabinet over on its side. When I did it first time, I actually used the 2 workbenches, which give it a little bit better height, and the reason why we do this is so we can put the back on, and that will allow us to make it a bit stiffer. Okay, now obviously one thing that you should do is whenever you cut your wood is put some markings on. So if you look carefully, where is it? It says top, and also have arrows on all the wood which says which is the front, so that when we take the wood on and off, we know which edge is which, just in case there's some slight variations. Note, as I've mentioned before, wherever the screws are, there are lines out, and wherever the wood ended, I put a double line, and that showed me where the wood started and ended, so I could screw the base in. Okay. What I did first was, with the back of both sides of wood, I used my little measuring doodah to find the hearth width and drilled pilot holes in, as you can see. Okay, and that's the back in. Obviously remember, when you're screwing them in, you're going to be taking them apart again, so there's no need to glue yet, because you might need to make changes to the design. Obviously all these battens on look a bit well, complicated, but when I first built the cabinet, we only had that one, the back and the control panel, and that was all we put in, well, apart from the top one there for the marquee, and the rest just sort of evolved with the design. Also, when I first made the design, this wood went all the way to the top, but after thinking about it, what I need is access to the back, to get access in case the speakers go, or I need to access the back of the light without having to take the marquee out. So I cut a hole in. I cut the wood off at that height, and that then allows me to glue this base in and screw it in permanent. If I need access, all I have to do is take off a little bit, and the integrity of the cabinet's still in place. And obviously this gap here is for access to the door to get inside the PC. Now, all of these bits of wood so far, and for the majority of them, came from the 660 width wood that I got cut from the wood shop, and that means when we put things together, we know they're going to fit perfect because they go flush with the edge of the wood. Okay, so next, with these 2 sides on, the side and the base on, we can put the top side on to the cabinet. Right, one thing I forgot to mention was, when you put the side on to here, it will just fall forward. So what I've made, and it's actually a permanent feature now, is this little bit of wood, which is exactly 660, and it's just screwed on with a angle bracket, so when we put the side of the wood on, it'll not move. Okay, and it'll add some rigidity to the whole cabinet as well for when we flip it over on its end. So once I've put this top on, again using the measurement gauge that I've made, and also screwed this onto the top, we can then flip the cabinet over on upward. Okay, so the cabinet's upright now. One thing I should mention is how to get the two sides lined up. That's fairly straightforward, because at the height that we mentioned before, remember the 63mm from the top? When we screw this side on, we lined it up with the line. When we screw this side up, we lined up with the line. And if you get your your level and put it on, you should find that you should be within a fairly good tolerance. And what this batten doubles as now is it pulls the two sides in. Now if you take this off, what you'll find is that inside where the wood's joined, it'll be 66mm, 660mm, or whatever width that you had it, 25 inches, whatever. But here on the outside edge, it would be splayed out, and it's just, so putting this wood in just pulls it all together. Obviously once you get your control panel and all of your other bits on, then that'll pull it together and make it more rigid. Okay, so with that in, I measured the battens, make sure they were all level. Obviously you can move them around if you wish, and then I put the front on. Okay, so when you put the front in, when I built it, these battens here were actually on the wood, on the markings, but to make it easy to take it off, I'm doing it this way. Now this was the only bit of wood where I had to screw in from the front, and that was simply because there was no other way of getting access to put it in. So as before, we get the centre lines on the wood, we place the screw through to get our pilot holes all the way through, and then we countersink the holes, and then screw it in place. Okay, so the front's on now, the kick plate. Now the reason for the height of that kick plate is because I wanted to put a drawer in, and the drawer was meant to go here, which it does, it just slides in, and there was going to be a panel here and then followed by a panel going round. After I built it, I realised that there was a bit of a flaw, because, well, not really a problem, because when you put the drawer in, then you also see a line here where the join is, and also a line here, and then I needed a separate bit of wood here which was angled to join this. So what I did is I redid it so that the drawer for the drawer is still this deep, but the front of the drawer goes from here all the way to the top. If I was designing this again, I'd just lift this up to the top where I need it, and then so next is the marquee. Got two bits of wood here and here. On the original drawing, when you look at the static plans, the batten actually goes along here, and the wood just sits on top. But because I was taking it apart, I just took it apart with the wood in situ, like so. Okay, and then that just goes on top. Now when I was putting it together, it wasn't exactly straight, so I had to make some adjustments to the wood, which you can probably see with the two screw holes there, and there, and a little bit of sanding on the back. Okay, so we've got the marquee on. Obviously this is just temporary fixing, so I'm going to be taking it apart to glue it again, and that's now our height for the marquee, which is about 15 centimeters, and I've put a bracket in dead center, and that'll be for the strip light. Okay. Next is the drawer. Now this was a fairly simple thing, so I took a piece of the wood, which was the exact width of the cabinet, and cut it about 10 centimeters, maybe 3 inches, 3.5 inches, made 3 of them. Then I cut some wood, which was the 660 minus 36, and I drilled them all in. Okay. Okay. For the front, because I didn't want to put any screws in, I used the 8mm drill to drill a couple of holes and put some dowels in, and they're glued in, so it's fairly solid. And just to make sure, I put an angle bracket in as well. And this daft bit of wood here on the back slots through the hole there, and it goes through about 3-4 inches from the back. Then if I want access to the drawer, I just push the cabinet back a little bit and it pops the drawer out. And the reason why I did that was to avoid having any handles or catches on the front. Now the other thing that I did was I took the height from the base to where I wanted the cabinet bottom to go, and using my bevel, I put a temporary bit of wood across here and then measured the angle, and that left an angle on the wood, which I then drew on to the MDF as such, and used the circular saw to cut that slight angle. Obviously I made a few test cuts first to make sure it was exact, using offcuts. Never do it first time on the real bit of wood, otherwise it'll just never work. And then once I cut it, it was a little bit too high, so I just used the plane just to get it down just a little touch, because it was a little bit too much for the sander. One more thing to note is that the wood on the buttons on the side goes a little bit higher than the bottom of the kick panel, and also goes a little bit further down from the wood, and that will give a good stop for the wood. And these two bits of wood here are just the same width as the drawer. Okay. Oops. Okay. So what we've now got there is the drawer goes flush at the front, and there's a little bit of a gap, and that's so we can get all the cables down the back safely. And as mentioned, it sticks out a little bit. Okay. Okay, I've took the drawer out and we're ready for the control panel. Now this was a bit of a trial and error, because the idea was, as I've mentioned before, is we have dowel holes here, and all of the bits of wood have dowels in to fit nice and snug, and that's an 8mm gap, so use whatever size drill bit you need for the dowels that you have. So the idea is that you pull out the drawer and you take it out sequentially from this number 14 to this number 8, which then gives you access to the control panel itself. So here are the 3 bits of wood. Now they were just measured in situ and shaped according to the angle that was required. So for the first bit of wood, as you can see, we have the dowels here, and the wood was slightly angled. That was again using the sliding bevel, and that was there to fit the facing part in nice and neat, and that was actually done afterwards, once it was all measured up. So the idea is these are all the same 660 width, so again the labelled front and back, so we know where we are. And being 660, it's a snug fit, so if you hold on, I'll just push them